As a founding member of the G20, South Africa has sought to ensure that the development priorities of the Global South and the African continent find expression firmly and permanently on the agenda of the G20. This is important not only for the people of Africa and the Global South. It is vital for global stability and security, alleviating resource pressures, managing population movements, and reducing the risk of conflict. As this is the first G20 Leaders Summit to be held in Africa, it carries the hopes and must reflect the aspirations of the people of this continent and of the world. We should not allow anything to diminish the value, the stature, and the impact of the first African G20 presidency. The G20 underscores the value of the relevance of multilateralism. It recognizes that the challenges that we face can only be resolved through cooperation, collaboration, and partnership. The adoption of the declaration from the summit sends an important signal to the world that multilateralism can and does deliver.
South Africa is hosting the G20 Summit, marking the first time the summit is being held on African soil. We're coming to you from Johannesburg as leaders gather under the theme Solidarity, Equality, Sustainability. Pretoria has positioned its presidency around shaping a more inclusive and development-focused global agenda. Welcome to this special program co-produced with Channels TV and partnered with Sunday World and TV BRICS Africa.
Over the past year, South Africa has pushed to reshape the global agenda, putting inequality at the center, calling for deeper reform of the global financial system and advocating for a debt sustainability for low-income countries. On this special program, we ask, to what extent has South Africa's presidency ensured that the G20 agenda reflects the priorities of emerging economies, particularly those of African countries? I'm Beatrice Marshall from CGTN. And I'm Innocent Simosa from Channels Television. Well, to help us break down South Africa's leadership and the priorities shaping the G20 Summit, we're now joined by our panelist, Dr. Malusi Mncube. He's, of course, a research associate at the Department of Politics and International Research at the University of Johannesburg. And, of course, we're also joined by Thembisa Fakude. He is Senior Research Fellow at Africa-Asia Dialogue. And we're also joined by Dr. Joseph Upile Matola, an economist and head of the Economic Resilience and Inclusion Program at the South African Institute of International Affairs. Gentlemen, thank you so much for indeed making the time. And I'm going to start off with you. I want a very brief comment from each of you. Thembisa, let me start off with you here, because South Africa's presidency of the G20 is coming to a close. Briefly, if you were to name one thing that has defined South Africa's presidency at the G20, what would it be?
I think it has been the pushing of the scrapping of the debt agenda, the new policies on rare earth minerals, particularly beneficiation, and the just energy transition.
Dr. Mncube?
Proudly civilizational overhaul. So we're seeing Africans, melanated black people coming to the fore in international relations, unapologetic and very proudly so.
Dr. Matola?
For me, I think it is the push for the African agenda, most notably South Africa has highlighted the issue of cost of capital, and I think this has been taken on board, and everybody is now talking about it. So I think it is one of the defining things that I've seen from this South African agenda.
Yeah, Thembisa, throughout the year we had more than 100 meetings from different groups, the Sherpa tracks and the ministers. Then the question is, because the president has said that he will push the African agenda during this presidency, the question then is, has the African agenda, was it on top of the agenda? Was it visible in this year's G20?
Well, it was visible, but whether you're going to achieve it is another story. I'm a pessimist when it comes to matters of G20 and all other multilaterals that have got no binding decisions. I don't think they were going to achieve it, but importantly is that the agenda has been amplified, and we got to have decision makers coming into this country discussing these very important issues, bringing them to the public domain for discussion, and I think that has been very important. Secondly, I think brand South Africa has also benefited a lot in this regard. President Trump's flip-flopping and U-turns has made President Cyril Ramaphosa a talking point, at least at this stage, the position that is taken, the fact that at the 11th hour the Americans made a U-turn, and we have the president who's digging in his heels in terms of how he's going to deal with junior US officials. That, again, places him in a different position. So overall, I think, notwithstanding, of course, that to me, for a very long time, this was a talk shop, but I think at this hour we're seeing some sort of a U-turn or a turn towards positivity, particularly for the politics and the stature of our President Cyril Ramaphosa.
So I do want to pick up from there, because the whole question of the African agenda, Thembisa, what exactly was the African agenda?
Big question. What is an African agenda? But I think what drives it is the scrapping of the debt or the restructuring of the colonial debt. Many African countries are saying we can't continue like this if we were to develop. And the fact that we've got these international and global leaders in this country, it gives us a chance, now that of course the African Union is now part and parcel and a permanent member of the G20, those voices are going to be amplified in terms of, one, scrapping the debt or restructuring the debt, because that is an impediment. The other point, of course, is our embracement of the just energy transition. We have huge deposits of coal, for example, in this country, which we would like to dig up and export to other countries. But we can't do that because we are or have committed to the just energy transition. And if we are to forsake our resources, the Western countries have to pay in terms of transitioning. They have to pay in terms of replacement of the energy plants that have been fueled by coal for over the years, right. Or else we will resort back into our resource and continue pushing the development agenda.
We will be looking at that beneficiation and the just energy transition in a minute, but Dr. Nkube, let me come to you here, because I want to find out about South Africa's strategy here, because its G20 presidency was guided by 4 pillars, mainly of its foreign policy: national interest, the Africa agenda, South-South cooperation, and multilateralism. Has South Africa succeeded in pursuing those agendas?
We are succeeding. It's not going to be done one day, but over and above, I want to add on to what he has done. The brilliance of what we have done, structurally, what has happened. South Africa became a member of BRICS, and BRICS structurally and foundationally, they're architectured, and they became part of the architecturing of the whole global economy. How so? Number one, we formulated a legally enforceable transactional bank, which is the new development bank, right? The head office is in Shanghai, and the regional office is here in Johannesburg. That's a vote of confidence, right? It's capitalized up to about $100 billion US, and it's got a contingency reserve arrangements. If we have balance of payments problems, they can be able to close that gap. So in terms of, we are not saying IMF must not be there. We're not saying World Bank must not be there. But structurally, we are saying this is how things should be done. It's either you do as we tell you, or we are going to crush you. But that has ended because now there's leverage. Now, what G20 does, we're not just a talking shop, over and above, it cements incrementally that what BRICS has achieved. What BRICS has done, it's phenomenal, it's structural, it's civilizational, and there is no going back. America is still powerful, but there are no more a hegemon, no ways.
All right, Dr. Matola, let's then talk to you about the issues around trading systems. And you've been following the G20 throughout the year. What key reforms that SA want to see in the global trading system? And I'm asking this because there are some concrete plans that are being still, being discussed. What are some of the issues around the trading systems?
Yeah, so there are a number of issues that the G20 is trying to do, and that South Africa has pushed for. The obvious thing is the reform of the World Trade Organization to make it more operational, more functional, as well as to make it development focused, because trade it doesn't happen in a vacuum. Yeah. The reason we do trade is for it to have some developmental impacts. So we need the World Trade Organization to be reformed so that it can deliver those things. And those are some of the discussions that South Africa was trying to push forward. There's also the pushing for the principles of what they're calling the principles of trade and inclusive growth. Yeah. Again, to make sure that trade provides inclusive growth where all countries are benefiting, those countries from the global north and those countries from the global south. And lastly, there's also some push for a guiding framework on investment and trade to make sure that there's inclusive industrialization happening on the African continent and on other countries in the global south. So South Africa has been pushing for that, but very important to note that there's some headwinds on this trade. I think you know very well.
So in other words, this will help in terms of the cost of borrowing.
Yes, it would help, because one of the reasons that leads to the high cost of borrowing is because we don't have the revenues ourselves. So we're forced to go into the international markets that and contract debt on very high interest rates. But if you have these export revenues, you have these foreign currencies in your reserves, and it helps on that front as well.
So I want to talk a little bit about that whole question of reforming the trading system that South Africa has been pushing. And if you look at Africa's share of global trade, it is still, around 3%, and yet developing countries still continue to get unequal access to the markets. Exactly what leverage does South Africa's G20 presidency have to reform the trading system?
When you look at all the other, there are enough countries out there that still want to see multilateralism and trading, rules-based trade continue. EU, China, and all other global south countries, they still want to see that continue. So that would help South Africa to leverage that and to push for. And there are other leverage points that South Africa can also have. There's been some initiatives that within the G20 that South Africa can push for. The compact with Africa, for example, that German started, that can be used to push for the trade agenda. The B20 engagement group is one of those engagement groups that people believe will survive the United States presidency, because there's those questions whether the engagement groups will survive. And the B20, the T20 push for the trade agenda as well. So South Africa can leverage those engagement groups moving forward.
Dr. Mncube, you've been very much vocal about the relationship with South Africa. What are some of the key proposals that SA put forward to address Africa's growing, debt distress? And I'm asking this because the cost of borrowing is just too much. At the same time, African countries, they can't even service their debt. They are paying, interest. They are not paying the actual debt, which is challenging. And they've been talking about the issues around reforming the global financial architecture. What does that mean in simple terms? Because people can say, what is reforming the global financial architecture? What does that mean?
Actually, we cannot have a 21st African century if we do not reform the monetary system. That has to be clearly understood, because after Second World War, 1945, the currency that dominated and subordinated the whole financial architecture of the world is the US reserve dollar currency. We have to critically understand that. What does that mean? It means the Americans went to Saudi Arabia and the most producing oil countries, right? And arm twisted them that if you are going to be selling oil, you're going to do it in US dollar currency. Why oil? Because oil is the basis of all industry. If you're an economist, you understand that. So once you sell in dollars, right, what it did now, it gave America the right to print the dollar and to spend on its trade deficit. That's why they have one of the biggest armies in the world without paying a cent. So the whole debt thing, what he's saying, I agree with him, but for me, it's piecemeal. It doesn't really take care of the problem.
I just want to come back briefly to Dr. Matola here, because when we talked about reforming the global trading system, we did not actually look at exactly what it is South Africa is pushing for. What are the concrete measures in those reforms?
Yeah, so some of the measures that South Africa is looking for, like I mentioned, is on the WTO. Right, so the WTO, there's been its functionality has been challenged, if I can put it that way. So we have like the dispute settlement systems, and there's a lot of problems there where trade is not happening because of there some disputes. So the whole organization needs to be reformed. And now with what is happening with the United States, with the tariffs and unilateralism, there's some people that are saying, is the WTO dead altogether? So it has been South Africa's duty as the current G20 presidency to make sure that that is not the case, to bring together other partners and to make sure that we preserve the multilateral trading system and to push for more global trade.
Let's then talk about the USA. We know that they boycotted the COP30 in Brazil, and part of the program during the G20 presidency, South Africa was pushing for the issues around increased climate finance flows. But then the question is, how are they going to unlock this? How is South Africa going to unlock these finances when America is not part of this process? And one would argue that they're one of the biggest polluters.
Yeah, I think it's an important question, and South Africa has to be very careful, because we're not going to be funding the mistakes of the developed world. We find ourselves in this situation not because of our own doing, but because of the irresponsible acts of the global north, who continue to overuse fossil fuels for decades, and their level of development is at this point because of that irresponsible action. Now we are in a position where we are compelled to transition into using clean energy, but that has to be funded somehow. And we have to insist, and I'm glad I saw a number of young people yesterday protesting and calling for the global north to continue funding and looking at how they're going to assist African countries to transition into these new energies. So that's the first point. But at the same time, South Africa was, I think, too swift in its embracement of the new call to join this club. And in the interim, we have committed and accepted donations, which are not really donations. They have to be paid at some point. And we're talking about billions of dollars at the moment. And it's not going to be you and I who are going to be paying this. This is future generation. Our grandchildren will have to be stuck with this debt. So it's important for us at this point that we speak sense to the powers that be, and we put pressure on the current leadership that they must not accept loans. These donations must be free, and they must not be payable or repayable. And that's, we owe our future generations in that regard, because if we don't, it's a double whammy. So we have the historical colonial debt, plus we're going to be having another debt which will be as a result of this so-called just energy transition.
Yeah, and change can be scary because I'm asking because coal, some argue that we're not ready to just do away with coal, we need energy mix. But still, people are scared that this clean energy might destabilize the job market. Do you believe that we are able as the continent to basically go to clean energy or mix the energy?
No, we're not. I don't think we're ready. I think the level of economic development necessitates for us to continue using the current fossil fuels responsibly. We have to be at some point exempted. China, although it has been exempted by the Kyoto Protocols, because it was regarded as a developing country for a very long time, but it has voluntarily come out and say, we want to take the responsibility. And that's what we must push for. The Kyoto Protocols must not be replaced by anything else. And what's worrying, of course, is this over-enthusiasm that you see sometimes at these COPs. I've attended over 5 COPs. And when I mean COPs, I mean the COP 23, 24, 25, and 26, and now it's 30. And you see Africans really over-enthusiastic, calling for these changes. And it's okay, but also at the same time call for the financing of the transition. It must not just be about us doing the right thing, which is correct to do, but we must also put pressure on the global north to finance this transition that we're all talking about.
Talking about inequality being institutionalized, if indeed it is institutionalized, how does South Africa then propose to make the inequality issue a global agenda?
Well, South Africa is perhaps one of the leading countries in the world when it comes to matters of injustice and inequality. So in South Africa, we toy at the drop of the hat, and that's going to continue. But we need to allow this parallelism in terms of our activism. I have a problem with an activist foreign policy. I think activism should be left to civil society because they're not hindered by any forms of regulations. They can do and push and force the policymakers to make correct policy decisions. And this usurping of the struggle and activism by the president of this country, for me, was problematic. The fact that we had this G20 talking about solidarity and I don't know what else, I think it was taking a responsibility and an occupation of a civil society. Once you have the government talking about fighting injustice, you should be concerned, because politicians are not known for loving those kind of activism. Politicians would like to see order, and I'm one of those who always criticize the monopolization of civil activism. And I think the themes that were chosen by South Africa for this G20, they don't belong within the boardrooms and within G20, but they belong outside G20. And we saw the C20, for example, which was taking place in Benoni, amplifying those concerns, and they were very effective in that regard. President Lula of Brazil and Cyril Ramaphosa went on to close that function, and there was a very healthy activism that was taking place.
Dr. Matole?
Yeah, if I can just add to that question, I think what we have seen from the inequality report is undoubtedly that there are very concerning metrics. Inequality is just, we haven't improved. Things are getting worse. 83% of all countries in the world have inequality levels that are considered unacceptable. Of all the wealth that has been created over the last 2 decades, 41% of that has gone to the top 1%. And half the population has shared 1% of that worth. The last 2 decades, the rich 1% have added $1.3 million to their own worth, whilst the bottom 50% have added just $500, right? So the metrics are going in the way that they're not supposed to go.
I think we're also being sold a lie to an extent. The attitude of the service concentrated economy is extremely problematic. I think at some point we need plumbers, we need painters, we need electricians, and you can see there's a deliberate sell of this service concentrated skills, for lack of a better term. And yet our people are going to be found wanting because it's a market that's going to be saturated very soon. It's a market that's extremely competitive. It involves not only Africans, but it involves Asians, Americans, etc. And yet we are failing to produce goods. Africans are not producing goods. We are producing intellectuals, we're producing service providers. And I think we need to rethink our position in terms of establishing or re-establishing a product-driven economy. Because our young people are not going to be competitive with time if we neglect this very important part of the economic development.
All right, gentlemen, we'll leave it there for the moment. We are now going to take a short break. When we come back, we will continue with our conversation on South Africa and its G20 presidency. Do stay with us.
Welcome back to this special program co-produced by Channels Television and CGTN. We're still with Dr. Mathole and Dr. Mncube. All right, let's pick up the conversation with you, Dr. Mathole. We are looking at the issues of equity, harnessing critical minerals for inclusive growth and sustainable development. But the downside of this is that the challenge here in South Africa has been the issues around beneficiation for small-scale miners, and also some feel that the issues of mining and minerals in the African continent, Africa looks like the producer, not a manufacturing partner with other countries. Then the question is, what does an equal partnership between Africa and global markets look like in your view?
Global markets and Africa partnership in terms of the critical minerals has to be an arrangement where Africa is adding value to the minerals that it extracts, is adding as much value as it can before it exports those minerals. Because the situation that we have right now is that Africa extracts or global companies come into Africa, they extract, they take out the minerals, take them home, convert them into whatever they're converting them, then send them back to Africa. If you look at the share of revenue or the share of value that remains in Africa after that extraction is less than 1%, or it's less than 5%. So that's definitely not an equitable partnership. So we're talking about Africa should be able to invest into our mining sectors. Critical minerals are the backbone of the world economy now. Yeah. You have seen all these fight for critical minerals. But if we continue with the status quo, what we'll end up with is this demand for critical minerals will be there. It will extract from us, and we'll have nothing to show for it. And only the global north and the big companies are the ones that are going to have something to show for it.
Yeah, Dr. Mncube, is there commitment from African leaders in addressing what he's talking about in terms of changing the status quo? Do you see commitment? I mean, because here in South Africa, the issue of beneficiation has been on the minister's desk for quite some time now. Do you see commitment?
Normatively, there is commitment, normatively, and I want to say African Union has done very, very well. Yes, we can do a SWOT analysis and talk down about their weaknesses and all that, but normatively, structurally, in terms of normativeness, they've done very, very well, and we've come up with Agenda 2063, what has to be done, and there is some piecemeal work that we are doing and all that. I'll speak about others. But head on, we have not been able to do it. And part of the problem has been Africa's leaders, and we must speak about that elephant in the room. On a macro basis, it's the imperialists. England, America, they are the imperialists in the whole of Africa, not just South Africa. Right, and they haven't allowed, because they have the military power, they have the financial power, the reserve dollar currency. Right, now what they did, they built in Africa, right from the 60s when we got our independence. Hence Nkrumah wrote the book, Neocolonialism, the Last Stage of Imperialism. Hence, Nkrumah said, after political independence, we must focus on economic independence. Right, now what they did, the imperialists, they built a buffer class of middle-class, very rich African people who thought by having a billions they've arrived and they've discarded their people. You go to Kenya, ghettos are big. You come to South Africa, ghettos are big. You go to DRC, ghettos, and you've got a few billionaire ruling class Africans who smile from ear to ear and they think they've arrived, whereas the majority of the black people are in poverty. So in that sense, no.
So I want to come to Dr. Matole here, because, you know, the whole question of beneficiation, as Innocent talks about it, is not a new idea of how to industrialize Africa. Africa needs value addition. That is not new, and as you've rightly mentioned about Burkina Faso. But the question is, though, what is the real concrete measure that is being proposed by South Africa to ensure that value addition for Africa actually becomes a reality?
Yeah, so South Africa, on a national level, it has just introduced the strategy on critical minerals. I think it's done that this year. So in there, it's about beneficiation is actually at the core of that. So it's about empowering communities where there's the mining, as well as making sure that there's investment, adequate investment into these sectors. Because the only way you can achieve beneficiation is if capital is going there. Now we've been talking about the issues of cost of capital and so on and so forth. Unfortunately for South Africa and for Africa in general, getting investments, getting funds into those sectors is still problematic. But I think we have other sources of financing that have been introduced, including the partnership with the Chinese and so on and so forth. That is going there. That is going to assist with beneficiation. And just to add, the initiatives like the Belt and Road initiative that China has embarked on. So that brings infrastructure, the right infrastructure that is needed for you to grow industries, including the mining and so on and so forth. And there's been a lot of capital that has gone in there. And so that's what is going to help with beneficiation.
The US had initially signaled, you know, this is a little bit of geopolitics now. They had initially signaled that, you know, they were not going to attend the G20 in South Africa. Now we hear probably they will participate in some form. You know, what does this hesitation from Washington say about commitment to multilateralism? What is the future here?
Oh, no, I mean, the United States is clearly and unambiguously shown that it does not want to continue with multilateralism. In fact, it's China now that has taken the mantle of trying to push for multilateralism. If you saw the summit that they had in East Asia, was it in Malaysia, 2-3 weeks ago, China was emphasizing that the rest of us, we need to push for multilateralism. And the United States has clearly stepped aside from that. And I mean, you can see through the actions. What was South Africa's theme for the G20? It was solidarity, equality, and sustainability. Those are the foundations of global multilateralism. And the United States outright rejected that, not just in words, now in writing. They say you can just issue a chair's statement, but we don't want you. It was an order to the South African government. We don't want you to adopt a declaration. So it's definitely thrown all the spanners that they could throw in the works, and to try to stop that, and in so doing to try to stop South Africa's efforts to preserve the multilateral arrangement that the world has.
And looking at long-term strategy, what do you think South Africa should push forward in terms of making sure that they strengthen the South-South cooperation to be resilient, because we need it to work? And how can South Africa's presidency make sure that this is not overlooked, and particularly from the trade side of things? And perhaps Dr. Mncube, you'll give me the geopolitical side of things. Yeah. Maybe we can start with trade.
Yeah, I think South-South cooperation is now more important than it's ever been. One, South Africa should push for and focus on other platforms as well beyond the G20, because we have other platforms. We have the BRICS platform that can help push. I mean, the BRICS, by definition, its main objective is to push for the Global South agenda. Next week, there is going to be the AU-EU Summit. Yeah, that's a platform that can also be used. I know my colleague Dr. Mncube here is very skeptical with the partnerships with the Global North, but there are some partners that can assist with the. I mean, every country has its self-interest, but there are some arrangements that can be leveraged to make sure that we promote multilateralism. Because what you have to understand is, with the changes in Washington, with what's happening in Washington, even the Europeans are looking elsewhere. They need Africa now more than ever. They need the African market, which is 3.4 trillion, a $3.4 trillion market, if it realizes its potential. 1.3 billion people. They need that. So we can leverage that AU-EU partnership as well to see where it can take us in terms of trade, in terms of development financing, and other development goals.
How do we then strengthen South-South cooperation, and looking at with these geopolitical tensions that we're currently observing, how do we strengthen it?
Already we're doing it. He's spoken about Xi Jinping addressing basically what he was talking about. He was talking about the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, and he was also talking about the Association of Southeastern Asian countries. Basically, all that adds up to what's called the BRICS Plus, right? As much as others, he is right, as much as others are interacting still with America. I mean, MBS of Saudi Arabia was just recently, is in America right now. He's pledged to what's called, to invest about $1 trillion. And in principle, I'm not against that. I would do that. It's smart. But at the same time, he's selling, oil to China, obviating the US dollar currency. So he's no more using the petrodollar. He's using yuan or blockchain payment systems, which is smart. Why is he doing that? Why are all economies now hedging? It's because America doesn't have the power to call the shots anymore. So yes, we are increasing, and I've given you that answer. It is happening. But America being powerful and having their history, if you read the history of imperialists, they will still try to frustrate each and every country.
So I want to bring it back, Dr. Matole, to South Africa's presence at the G20 and hosting this very historic moment for the continent. The African Union is now a member of the G20, together with South Africa's voice at the G20. Does this now strengthen Africa's voice globally? Does it give the Global South, does it give African countries a lot more say when it comes to global governance?
Yeah, so that's been the thinking and the reason why the African Union was invited, because before that, it was only South Africa that was in the G20, and the one that was doing the heavy lifting in terms of carrying Africa's voice in there. And it was thought wise that if the AU is part of the G20, then Africa's voice is going to be amplified. The EU is in the G20. It represents all its 27 or so countries. South Africa's presidency, which comes in the second year of the AU being a full member of G20, has been met with massive headwinds from the United States, like a complete pushback from the United States. So we don't have enough sample size to see if this is going to work. But so far, I would say South Africa has done really well, given the circumstances. And from what we have seen, the AU has also, the partnership of the South Africa and the AU have done well in driving the South African agenda. You have seen the whole issue of cost of capital, the whole issue of pushing for an African credit rating agency, as a means of lowering the cost of capital. All those things are a partnership between the South African presidency and the AU and other African organs. So I think it will help to make the G20 more sensitive to Africa's needs.
So let's talk legacy, Dr. Ncube. As we wind down on the program, South Africa is handing over the G20 presidency to the United States. In terms of legacy, first of all, it's been a historic moment for South Africa hosting this on African soil, the first ever. But how will South Africa, though, leave a lasting legacy? What will the legacy of South Africa's G20 presidency be?
The legacy is that we've stood our ground. It's definitely going to be a messy business when an empire declines and goes down. An empire feels humiliated. So it's something they have to deal about themselves on their own. But the legacy is that whereas they used to say black people cannot do this, there we have the legacy. It's been done. Dr.
Matole.
Yeah, so South Africa, its legacy for me, it's mostly in the agenda that it set. Right now, it's at the annual meetings in Washington, D.C. last month. South Africa established the African Experts Framework, which is meant to safeguard the work that has been done within South Africa's G20 presidency in terms of African countries. If you remember, there was the establishment of the African Experts Panel, which looked into various issues of debt, cost of capital, and so on and so forth. And South Africa has established the African Experts Framework that is meant to take forward the agenda of Africa, no matter what happens next year. It's going to be in there, and South Africa has put its print on the G20.
Indeed, gentlemen, thank you very much for being a part of this discussion. Well, what an insightful conversation. A big thank you to all of you. Like the weather here in Johannesburg, the international political climate is also shifting quickly. We are glad to have our guests helping us unpack what Africa needs to hold on to in this era of change. And just as we made it through this stormy weather together, we'll navigate the global storms together as well.
Now, a big thank you to our guest, Dr. Malusi Ncube, who is a research associate at the Department of Politics and International Relations at the University of Johannesburg. And of course, Tembisa Fakude, who is a senior research fellow at Africa-Asia Dialogue, and Dr. Joseph Upile Matola, an economist and head of the Economic Resilience and Inclusion Program at the Southern African Institute of International Affairs. And I'm Innocent Samosa from Channels Television News.
And I'm Beatrice Marshall from CGTN. And from all of us here in Johannesburg, South Africa, thank you for watching and goodbye.